The day it happened was one the neighborhood wouldn't forget. It was a calm afternoon in the Willow Ridge Estates, a quiet, gated suburban community where everyone prided themselves on safety and order. The kind of place where every house had a flagpole, where homeowners associations dictated the exact shade of white you could paint your picket fence, and where neighbors kept their voices low, but their judgment high. And Linda Harrison. She saw herself as the gatekeeper. She sat by her bay window, watching the peaceful street when she saw him. A tall black man, well-dressed, walking with purpose, too much purpose. Linda's fingers curled around her ceramic mug. Her heart pounded. She knew all her neighbors. She knew the mailman, the landscapers, the delivery drivers. But this man, he was different. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't jogging. He wasn't delivering anything. He wasn't struggling with a package, wearing a uniform, or carrying a clipboard. He wasn't nervous. He walked like he belonged. Her pulse spiked. Linda reached for her phone and dialed 911, her voice hushed but urgent. "Yes, I need to report a suspicious person in my neighborhood." The dispatcher's voice was neutral. "What exactly is he doing, ma'am?" Linda's eyes darted back to the window. The man had stopped in front of the Pattersons' house. He pulled out his phone, glanced around, and then stepped onto their porch, knocking. "He's at someone's door. I don't know if they're home, but he looks out of place. He's just standing there." The dispatcher hesitated. "Ma'am, do you know if the homeowner is expecting a visitor?" "I don't think so," she snapped. She had to stop this. "We'll send a unit to check it out." Linda exhaled. Good. She had done her part. Minutes later, 2 patrol cars sped onto the street, tires screeching. The flashing red and blue lights sent a ripple of energy through the quiet suburb. The peace was shattered. The man turned at the commotion, eyes narrowing in confusion as the officers stepped out. Hands hovered over holstered weapons. "Sir!" one of the officers barked. "Step away from the door." The man's brow furrowed. He glanced at them, then back at the house, before slowly raising his hands in a calculated, almost bored motion. "What seems to be the problem, officer?" His voice was deep, smooth, completely unbothered. The second officer, younger, more eager, squared his stance. "We got a report about a suspicious person. Do you live here?" "No," the man said simply. "But I have an appointment." Linda's heartbeat thrummed as she stepped onto her porch, arms folded. She wanted to see this. The officers exchanged a glance. The younger one tightened his grip on his belt. "An appointment for what?" The man sighed like he was already bored with the conversation. "I'm here to meet Mr. and Mrs. Patterson." He nodded at the door. "They're expecting me." "Yeah?" The officer's tone was sharp. "Got any ID on you?" The man's jaw clenched slightly. Then the front door swung open. "Congressman, you made it!" An older white man, Harold Patterson, stepped onto the porch, beaming, before his expression dropped at the sight of the officers. His wife, Eleanor, appeared behind him, her face tight with concern. "What the hell is going on?" Harold's voice was sharp. Silence. Everything changed in an instant. The younger officer's face lost all color. His hand dropped from his belt as he took a small step back. "Congressman?" he repeated, voice cracking slightly. The black man exhaled through his nose, then gave a small, forced smile. "Yes, Congressman Elijah Carter." His voice had an edge now. "Would you like me to show you my ID, or are we past that part?" Linda felt the air shift. Her stomach twisted, her vision blurred. A tight, panicked pressure formed in her chest. The officers looked at each other, frozen, unsure. Harold Patterson's mouth set in a thin line. He turned, eyes scanning the street, and his gaze landed on Linda. She stopped breathing. "You called them, didn't you?" His voice was low, dangerously calm. Linda's throat closed. Her hands trembled. Elijah Carter turned now, following Harold's gaze, and his eyes locked onto Linda. His expression? Amusement, cold, calculating. Then he smiled. No warmth, no kindness, just something sharp. Linda's knees almost buckled. "I'd like to speak to whoever made this call," Elijah said smoothly. The officers shifted uncomfortably. The younger one was already sweating. Linda turned to run inside, but then, "Elijah," Harold's voice rang out. "Would you like to come in?" The congressman's gaze flickered back to the officers, his smile widening before he turned back to the Pattersons. "I'd love to." He stepped inside without another glance at Linda. The door closed behind him, and Linda stood there, cold fear gripping her bones, because she knew this wasn't over. Elijah stepped into the grand foyer, the tension thick in the air. Eleanor handed him a glass of whiskey before Harold even had to ask. "You all right?" Harold muttered. Elijah took a slow sip, exhaling sharply. "I'm used to it." Harold scowled. "You shouldn't have to be." The congressman chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "People like that? They're not afraid of crime. They're afraid of us existing." Eleanor shook her head, muttering, "She always was a nosy witch." Elijah's lips twitched. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, his gaze flicking toward the window where he could see Linda standing frozen on her porch. "You know," he said casually, "I could make a very big deal out of this." Harold leaned back in his chair. "I wouldn't stop you." Eleanor smirked. "Neither would I." Elijah sighed, then downed the rest of his drink. "No," he finally said. "That's too easy." He set the glass down. "I'd rather watch her sweat." She slammed the door behind her, pressing her back against the wood, breathing hard. She grabbed her phone with clammy hands and started typing a neighborhood watch message. "We need to be more careful. We don't really know who's coming into this neighborhood anymore." She hovered over the send button. Then she heard a knock. At her door. Her stomach dropped. Slowly, her fingers numb, she set her phone down and turned the knob. Elijah Carter stood on her porch, alone, smiling. Linda's vision spotted black. "Hi, Linda," Elijah said smoothly. "Mind if we talk?" Linda's blood ran cold. Elijah Carter stood on her porch, alone. That same smooth, unreadable smile stretched across his face. He wasn't holding a phone, wasn't looking around nervously. No witnesses, just her and him, standing inches apart, separated by nothing but the thin screen door. Linda swallowed hard. I don't know what you think." Elijah tilted his head, amusement flickering in his sharp brown eyes. "Relax, Linda." His voice was calm, too calm. "I just want to talk." Every instinct in her body screamed to shut the door, lock it, but she couldn't. Something about the way he stood there, so confident, so unmoved by everything that had just happened, pinned her in place. She forced a breath. "Talk about what?" Elijah's smile widened just slightly. "You tell me. You were the one who called the police on me, weren't you?" Linda's grip on the doorknob tightened. "No need to lie," Elijah cut in smoothly. He leaned slightly forward. "You thought I didn't belong here. You thought I was a threat." Linda's face burned. Look, I made a mistake. A mistake?" Elijah let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. "Linda, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice." Linda's mouth opened, then closed. Elijah didn't move. He just let the silence stretch between them, thick and suffocating. Finally, he spoke again. "Do you know how many times this happens to men like me? How many times we get police called on us for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time?" Linda's throat tightened. "I wasn't trespassing. I wasn't breaking any laws. I was knocking on a friend's door." But that wasn't enough for you, was it? Elijah's voice was quiet, but the weight behind it was heavy. Linda's stomach twisted. I thought... Elijah held up a hand. No, Linda, you didn't think. That's the problem. The words hit like a slap. She sucked in a shaky breath. I didn't mean... But you did. Elijah's voice was still calm, still too controlled. You meant to call the police. You meant to have me questioned. You meant for something to happen. But the only thing you didn't mean was for me to be someone important. Linda felt sick. Elijah exhaled, shaking his head. Now the thing is... His gaze locked onto hers. I could make a very big deal out of this. You understand that, right? Linda's stomach dropped. I could make one phone call, he continued, and the entire country would know your name. You'd be the new face of a viral news story. Wealthy suburban woman calls cops on black congressman. It would be on every major network. Your picture would be everywhere. Your family, your job, your neighbors. Everyone would know exactly who you are and what you did. Linda's breath came in short gasps. But I'm not going to do that. She blinked. Elijah smiled again, but this time there was something sharp, something cruel lurking beneath it. No, Linda, I have a much better idea. Her skin went ice cold. I'm going to let you live with this. Elijah stepped back, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm going to let you feel that fear, that humiliation, that shame every time you step outside. Every time you see my car pull up to the Pattersons' house, every time you hear my name. Linda's pulse hammered. I want you to feel that paranoia creeping in, wondering if I will make that phone call, if I'll mention what you did in my next speech, if one day you'll wake up to your face all over the news, if your husband's company will suddenly have a PR scandal because of you. Tears burned at the edges of Linda's vision. Elijah's eyes darkened. I want you to spend every day wondering, is today the day I ruin your life? A cold shudder racked through her body. Elijah adjusted his cuffs, took a step back, and gave her a final, knowing smirk. Enjoy the rest of your day, Linda. Then he walked away, just like that. Linda stood frozen as he stepped down her porch, calmly strolled back to his car, and drove away, leaving her standing there, broken. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. Because she knew deep down that Elijah Carter didn't have to do anything else. He had already won, and she would never sleep peacefully again.